Welcome back to the picturesque valley, surrounded by majestic mountains where trees blossom with multicolored leaves. The Enchanted Valley town invites you to another adventure of our brave heroes, Liam and Noah. Of course, their parents couldn't be missing. After all, the boys are 8 and 4 years old. Today, our courageous and adventure-hungry youngsters are about to embark on a visit to the animal shelter. Will they succeed in helping the animals? Find out for yourselves. Liam and Noah were incredibly excited when their parents told them that they would go together to the animal shelter. The boys loved all animals and very much wanted each one to have a loving home, even though they didn't have a pet at home yet. They knew that living creatures are not toys, and together with their parents, they concluded that they were still too young for a dog, even though a dog was their dream. But our heroes remembered well how they took care of Holly, their neighbor's dog, for a week. It was a big responsibility for them, and not only for them, but also for their parents, who had to plan the entire week with the dog. Before heading to the shelter, the boys, together with their mum, packed old but intact blankets and animal food they bought at the store into the car. Their parents explained to them that every shelter needed blankets to protect the animals from the cold and food for the animals in any quantity. Earlier, Liam read on the shelter's website what kind of food they used and what was best for the animals living in their city to avoid wastage. With the car loaded like that, our family headed to the shelter. When they arrived at the shelter, they were greeted by Mrs. Martha, who worked at the shelter and took care of her group of dogs. It was Mrs. Martha who guided them around the shelter. Liam and Noah saw many different animals, wagging dogs, cats, and even rabbits hopping in their cages. Unfortunately, most of the animals looked sad. "Do these dogs always look so sad?" Liam asked. "Not always, boys, but you see, there are a lot of dogs, cats, and other animals here. Unfortunately, they are in cages, which always makes them sad," Mrs. Martha said. "Animals, just like people, have feelings and need closeness and love. They love people and contact with humans, even though humans often harm them, which is why they end up in cages in our shelter." The boys were amazed because they couldn't imagine how anyone could harm such cute animals. After touring the entire shelter, Mrs. Martha led our heroes to her group of dogs. As the boys walked with Mrs. Martha between the boxes, Liam noticed that from time to time, people approached the boxes and took the dogs for a walk. "Mrs. Martha, who are those people taking these dogs? Because I see that these dogs are very happy." "These are volunteers. Volunteers in our shelter are very important people. They come and take the dogs for walks, take care of their boxes to keep them clean, feed them, and do many things to help the dogs find a new home." "Can I become a volunteer?" Liam asked shyly. "You know, Liam, you're still a little too young because, you see, the dogs in our group are quite big. Each dog needs to be approached individually. Some may be aggressive because they have suffered harm from humans and are simply afraid. When you're older, we'll be happy to invite you to volunteer." Liam felt a little sad for a moment, but he remembered that a dog is not a toy, and indeed, some dogs were big. During further exploration, the brothers came across a sad dog named Buddy. Buddy was an older dog who had spent many years in the shelter. He was very polite, but due to his mature age, there were no takers for adoption. Of course, except for Liam and Noah, who felt they had to do something to help Buddy find a home. First, they asked if Dad could take Buddy for a walk with them, which Mrs. Martha agreed to. During the walk with the dog, Liam came up with an idea. "Dad, on our way back, can we stop by Mrs. Teresa's house? She used to have a dog, but it passed away a few weeks ago. Maybe she would like to adopt Buddy. When I talked to her, she said she was lonely at home and needed to find a friend, and who would be a better friend for her than our Buddy?" Dad laughed, but said it was a great idea because Buddy was really polite and well-behaved, and he didn't have much strength left for long walks. At the end of the visit, the boys said goodbye to Mrs. Martha, who thanked them very much for the things they brought and arranged for the next visit to the shelter. Buddy returned to the cage and immediately became sadder. On the way back, Dad stopped by Mrs. Teresa's, and Liam showed her a picture of Buddy and told her in detail how he behaved. Mrs. Teresa listened with interest and immediately said it was a great idea, but she would need help because she didn't have a car and it was difficult for her to get to the shelter. Dad promised to help her because he himself liked Buddy and wanted his happiness. Mrs. Teresa immediately called Mrs. Martha and arranged to visit Buddy the next day. After a few visits and walks together, Buddy came permanently to Mrs. Teresa's new loving home. Meanwhile, Liam and Noah felt they brought joy not only to Buddy, but also to Mrs. Teresa, and Dad too, because he was also happy and often visited Buddy. See you later.